Atheists
have nothing to die for and everything to live for.
Cliffe is in conversation with Matt, the former president of the Atheist Society of Texas, about the meaning of life, morality, and the nature of love. Throughout the exchange, Matt repeatedly raises objections to Christianity and belief in God in general, often introducing new points as he goes. Cliffe does respond, but because Matt presents so many arguments, it would take far too long to address each one in detail. What I would do, however, is pause briefly and highlight the key issues Matt raises, then give concise replies to them. That way, it becomes clearer what Cliffe might have said if he had the time to answer each point thoroughly.
One is this continued objection to, without God there's no ultimate meaning, there's no real purpose. Well, I don't know what you mean by real purpose, that seems kind of cheaty. But as far as ultimate meaning, yes, I agree. No ultimate meaning in the existential sense that you're talking about it, and it doesn't matter one bit. The car that I've got out there parked in the parking lot I've had for a couple of years, one of these days it's going to rot away. Does that mean it's not valuable now? Does that mean it doesn't have any value to me now? I mean, there's no purpose, so I just go ahead and chuck it now?
Matt's car analogy shows the weakness of a materialist view. A car has value only while it's useful, and when that utility is gone, it can simply be discarded. If we apply the same logic to people, then those who seem unuseful could be treated as worthless, which is dangerous and dehumanizing. Christianity offers a higher view. Every person has value, not because of their utility, but because God loves them. Even if no one else cares for someone, God does. That's why we are called to love others as ourselves. Our worth and meaning rest not in usefulness, but in the unconditional, divine love of God.
Let's get rid of it. Eventually it's going to be useless. That's absurd. We all recognize that things have meaning and purpose right now because they are valuable to us. These are properties that we imbue things with and we imbue people with. Do I matter as much to you as your spouse? Bet you I don't, unless it's you. This idea that without the ultimate meaning, or if something is ultimately meaningless, doesn't mean it is always meaningless, or it doesn't mean it's meaningless in every way. This idea about morality, that it's all relative. Actually, I'm a staunch defender of absolute morality, and despite Cliffe's straw man, I'm not saying that slavery is immoral because I said so. It might surprise some people to know that while I don't think there's intrinsic value, I think that there is value in people, and that's the value that we imbue them with.
Matt just said, the value we imbue them, people, with. If that's only it, then we can easily withdraw this value. This is atheism logically extrapolated.
This idea that because I said so is the basis for secular morality is flatly absurd. It's the exact opposite of what I just finished talking about how you go through and you build up this system. We are physical beings in a physical universe that follows physical laws. There are truths to be discovered about how our actions benefit us and how our actions harm us. This is simply true. We don't need another mind. This is about the interaction of minds, but we don't need some transcendent mind to dictate what is true. We discover what is true about the reality that we inhabit. God or not, soul or not, we can choose everything on the list that Cliffe just talked about being good to each other and building a productive society and caring and loving and trying to end poverty, trying to end oppression, and trying to build a better society. We can do all of that just because it's the right thing to do.
If morality is based only on what is useful to me, it collapses quickly. Enemies, rivals, or even colleagues competing for the same role may not be useful to you, yet that doesn't justify mistreating them. God's standard is higher: love even your enemies, seek peace, and act with integrity. If usefulness alone decides what is moral, communities can easily agree that harming someone is useful, which leads to injustice. Christian morality is different. It's grounded in what God declares right and true, not in short-term utility. Whether or not someone seems useful, God commands us to love our neighbor as ourselves.
There's no evidence for a soul. In fact, there's good evidence against it.
When we speak of evidence for the soul, near-death experiences provide striking examples. There are documented cases where people were declared clinically dead, with no heartbeat, no measurable brain activity, and their body lying motionless. Yet after being revived, they reported details they could not have known through physical senses. Some described conversations happening in other rooms, events occurring far from their body, or even objects on the hospital roof that no one in the room could see. These reports were later verified as accurate. Such cases suggest that consciousness can exist apart from brain function, pointing to the reality of the soul. Researchers like Raymond Moody, Life After Life, Kenneth Ring, and Pim van Lommel, Consciousness Beyond Life, have documented numerous accounts. The Lancet, Van Lommel et al., 2001, even published a peer-reviewed study on near-death experiences in cardiac arrest survivors, supporting the conclusion that awareness can occur when the brain is clinically inactive.
There's no evidence, or not enough evidence, of the various God claims that are out there, or not any particularly good evidence, at least that I've been made aware of. But I could be wrong. And tomorrow, I could find out that there is a God, and that I do have a soul. And it wouldn't change very much for me as far as how I end up living my life, because I've already come to good reasons to do things. I'm open to being corrected on them, but what's going to correct me is reason and evidence.
We need to ask Matt, what evidence? Would you believe if you think something is good for you, or also in what is true? Sometimes people believe something to be good for them and they don't care what is true and authentic.
Not appealing to a God. And if people have asked me, well, what are you going to do if you die and you end up standing before God? Hey, I tried. I used my brain. I followed the evidence where it was. And by the way, if your character is actually accurately depicted in the Bible or the Quran, I don't want nothing to do with you. I'm already morally superior to you. I already care more about people than you do. I know. I've never sanctioned slavery, never sanctioned genocide. Gods have.
Typical tropes we get from the defenders of atheism. But they don't line up with the context or the facts.
Do all religions lead to the same God? I don't know. I think it's unlikely. I think they clearly all define God differently. I think you could go right down into the same church on the same pew and get two different people, and they're going to define God differently, and they're going to have different views of God. I think there's as many different religions as there are people trying to practice them. And my concern isn't whether or not they all lead to the same God. It's what kind of world do they end up creating? Because why should I care about an afterlife that I don't know whether or not it exists when I've got a life that I know that I have, and I'd like to make it better? And if your religion is impeding on the ability of people who don't practice your religion, or those who do, from living the best life they can right now, then your religion's a problem. That goes for Islam and Christianity and Scientology and Hinduism and everything. If you're advocating something that is detracting from the good of this world, you're part of the problem.
Thank you, gentlemen. Matt, the next question will start with you. Does being an atheist require the same faith that believing in God does?
No. I'm seriously, it doesn't require any faith to not believe something. It doesn't.
Again, a common claim, but wrong. If one doesn't believe in something, they believe in something else in its place. If you do not believe that your father is your biological father, you believe that someone else is. If not God, then someone else must be your creator.
Now, if atheism was this assertion that there are no gods, ooh, I pissed some people off. If atheism was this assertion that there are no gods, well then yes, you might be able to make a case that that was based on faith, or maybe it's not. It would depend on what the basis, what the foundation for that particular belief was. But atheism in the weak atheism sense of I do not believe this doesn't require faith. I don't believe there's a Bigfoot. That's not a faith. It's not a faith-based position. I'm not asserting certainty that there isn't a Bigfoot. I'm just not yet convinced. The Bigfoot claim hasn't met its burden of proof. Neither of alien abductions, which, by the way, I'll point out, you can actually go talk to real living people right now who will tell you their alien abduction story. Living, breathing people, you can talk to them. They will have stories that are similar in detail. In some cases, there are multiple people who have supposedly experienced this together. In some cases, the things that people have seen have been entire small towns And you can interview these people. How many people think that they're actually being abducted by aliens? Not me. And that's people you can talk to right now. Somebody writes a couple books, in a couple thousand years, somebody could stand up and say, hey, look, I wouldn't believe it, but look at all of these accounts. These are firsthand people. They were interviewed by the news. We have a much better record of what was happening at the end of the 20th and beginning of 21st century than we do about what happened back when Jesus was supposedly alive or back around the time that Hinduism was being formed. This is a real record. We even have video footage of people talking about how they came down. And then they'll start tying it together in an intricate little web, the same way conspiracy theorists do right now. Oh, there were lizard people in the government or crop circles out there. We don't believe in any of that, I hope. I am at Texas State. I kind of respect you guys because I don't care about colleges, so we're not in any rivalry. UT. But we don't believe that. Why should we? And yet we're expected to believe what is potentially a more extraordinary claim and weaker evidence.
Unlike reports of alien abductions, the eyewitness accounts of Jesus and his resurrection produced a radical, unified, and lasting transformation in his followers. Committed Jews became committed Jewish Christians, embracing beliefs that put them at odds with their own communities and cost many their lives. Alien encounters, by contrast, do not inspire unified teaching, life-changing moral demands, or sacrificial devotion. They lack prophetic anticipation in ancient texts, produce no verified miracles, and rarely lead to significant lifestyle change or self-sacrifice. The apostles gained peace and joy but also suffering and yet persisted, convinced of the reality of Christ, something far deeper than subjective experience.
There's nothing particularly extraordinary about a universe that's billions, 13.7 billion years old, that there might be some other life somewhere. I don't know. Probably unlikely they made it this far. No reason for them to pick out Earth because we're not special, despite what many creationists would have you believe. They've got this wily coyote god who straps on a hat and balances on a wire and goes through all this stuff to catch a coyote. He builds this entire massive universe, all for one mammalian species on this little bitty insignificant dot. Did the aliens get here? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't have any good reason to believe that they did. Doesn't mean I believe that they didn't. And yet we're expected to believe the more extraordinary claims of religion on less sound evidence. We're expected to believe miracles, things that suspend or violate the laws of nature. There's nothing about alien abductions that necessarily violates the laws of nature. Is there? I mean, it's at least slightly more reasonable, and yet we don't believe it with people you can talk to. And yet we're going to point to anonymous books that are hearsay accounts, copies of translations of copies by unknown and anonymous authors, wherein which we know there are forgeries.
We know the authors. Some liberal scholars believe they know better, but their evidence is invented. Things like, Matthew didn't mention that he is the author of his account, ignoring that this is very common in the ancient world.
Anybody seen Snake Salvation on TV? It's on National Geographic. It's about the snake handling Pentecostals, and they rely on Mark 16, somewhere in the 9 through 20 section, I think it's around verse 18, where she'll take up serpents. Mark 16, 9 through 20 is almost certainly a forgery. It doesn't exist in the oldest and best manuscripts, yet they believe it. Maybe it should be there. Maybe they're the ones that are right. I like snakes. I've got pet snakes. I'm not going to handle them. And I'm certainly, I'm going to handle mine. I'm not going to handle venomous snakes for fun. And certainly not as an exercise of faith, because there's not really good evidence that it's actually something that we should encourage, because those guys get bit and die all the time. And my pastor friends who don't adhere to that particular doctrine look at them and say, hey, dummy, God gave you a brain and doctors. Go. There's not agreement on these issues about gods. We don't have good evidence for these things. We have our fallacies and tired old arguments that have been rebutted over and over again. If there is a God, he knows exactly what it would take to convince me. He hasn't done it. It means he either doesn't exist or he doesn't want me to know he exists.
Does being an atheist require the same faith that believing in God does?
No, an atheist has a type of faith that says, I'm going to live for someone or something other than God. And the fascinating question that I love to ask my atheist friends is, what do you live for? And what is the evidence that whatever it is you live for is true? Now, the majority of my atheist friends living in the United States live for money. And it makes sense. Money can benefit you a great deal. Nothing wrong with money. But is the ultimate purpose of life to live for money? So my secular materialist friends are very talented. The majority of them work on Wall Street. And the majority of my secular materialist friends live for the American dollar. I think we live in a culture that puts a premium on that. I'm not saying that Matt does. I'm just saying the majority of my atheist friends, who are very wonderful people, live for money. Others of them live for pleasure. They've reduced the purpose of life to stimulating my nerve endings. I understand that. I enjoy pleasure. I'm convinced that pleasure is a gift from God. The central nervous system that I have that gives me pleasure is good. The taste buds on my tongue that enable me to enjoy food is good. But to reduce the purpose of life to stimulating my nerve endings, I mean, come on. Now, what I find interesting is Matt consistently says, well, there's not enough evidence. Fine. What I would love to hear from Matt is, what am I living for? And what's the evidence that what I am living for is true? See, friends, all of us are going to put our heads on our pillows tonight. None of us can prove that what we're living for is true. The question, though, is, what's the evidence that whatever it is you're living for is reliable and true? And there are a lot of different options out there. Now, Matt likes to talk a lot about the Bible, so let's talk about the Bible. The Gospels that we have in English today are based on over 5,200 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 2nd through the 10th century A.D., all agreeing to an infinitesimal degree. There is no document from antiquity that can even approach the New Testament Gospels in manuscript evidence. Secondly, you have 4 different Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're not carbon copies. Obviously, they use notes. There are similarities in language between especially the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But there's a tremendous internal consistency between Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There are no major contradictions. There are different perspectives. The same way that if you and I were standing on a street corner and we saw 2 cars coming down the street and we heard a woman scream, there was a screech of brakes, and then there was a collision. If you and I went to the police department and you said, officer, I saw the 2 cars coming down the street, I heard a woman scream, and then there was a collision. And if I were to say, officer, I saw the 2 cars coming down the street, I heard a screech of brakes, and then there was a collision, we're not contradicting each other. We're offering 2 equally valid perspectives on what really happened. And that's what you've got in the Gospels. I'm real glad they're not Xerox copies. They're not photocopies. They're unique perspectives on Jesus of Nazareth. Now, what I find astonishing is that Matt says he went to seminary.
No, I didn't.
All right, you were going to the ministry?
Yeah, I was going to. I didn't go.
Yeah, you want to go into the ministry. Okay? Which means you probably read the Bible. And then when you reel off a statement that the Bible doesn't say anything against slavery, that's embarrassing. Let me tell you why it's embarrassing. The main point of the book of Philemon in the New Testament is Paul is writing to a slave owner, Philemon. And he is saying, I met your runaway slave, Onesimus. Now, in the Roman Empire, the law is that you are permitted to execute the guy. He's a runaway slave. But I, Paul, am asking you, Philemon, to take Onesimus back, no longer as a slave, but as a brother in Christ. Who do you think fought and finally won for the abolition of slavery in the British Empire? A man named William Wilberforce, who served in the British Parliament, and it was due to his faith in Christ that he struggled against slavery in the entire British Empire until he won just before he died. Why did William Wilberforce fight for the abolition of slavery in the British Empire? Because he was a devoted follower of Christ, and he understood that all human beings are created in the image of God.
For his view, Wilberforce was called sectarian as the Church of England was deeply entangled in the slave trade in the 17th to 18th centuries and advised to keep his religion private.
Therefore, to stand against slavery and to stand for the value and dignity of all of human life is not an option. So I can promise you, folks, you got to read the text for yourself. Because if a man as intelligent as he can say, the Bible never says anything against slavery, you got to read it for yourself. Read Philemon in the New Testament.
In the end, it comes down to this: the evidence for God is more than enough for those willing to examine it honestly. The problem is not lack of evidence, but lack of willingness to accept it. It's like a criminal who insists, I'm innocent, while the evidence clearly points otherwise. The jury sees it, the facts are there, but the person keeps denying. Many atheists who later turn to God admit the same: the evidence was real, I just didn't want to accept it. When someone is sincere, they find there is enough evidence. When they refuse, they suppress the truth.